Hello, everyone. Welcome to our 8th lecture. And as you can probably tell from the Piazza Post, lecture is not canceled, and neither will next lecture be. So we'll still be having lecture, even though it's hack week. And it's just these topics that we're going into, obviously, we're not going to have a project on, but it's just like kind of extra fun, little interesting things. As well, and I also think they're also important. Like today, Kevin's going to be going over his stack views, and that's something something that goes really well with constraints and really kind of helps you lay out your views like in a much easier, less manual way. So please do come to lecture. Still teaching important stuff here. We're just not giving you a project to kind of test your knowledge, I suppose. But anyways, in terms of announcements, so it's just like I just want to announce some things to remind you guys because I posted on Piazza, but I just want to just send some points home. So first thing is we're doing a course feedback form. So and that's due next Tuesday, and we really hope that you guys will give us feedback because we really like doing this course and we really want to improve it for any future students. And you guys are kind of like the best reviewers for this course, right? So just give us your review. And in terms of incentives, 50% of the class fills out the form, then everyone will get an extra 6 points. So you should definitely fill out this form. And then also, don't forget, Midpoint Submission is due this Saturday. So it's just like for iOS, we just want you guys to just basically have your UI finished. And we just do this Midpoint Submission so we don't have any last-minute panic attacks on Piazza where you haven't done the project until like the day before it's due. So we just want to make sure that you guys pace yourselves. So please just try and get the UI finished for that. And then those requirements for the midpoint submission are on the hack challenge write-up, and that's on note 220 on Piazza. So just please make sure you read the instructions on there. And then also we're going to be communicating, or you're going to be communicating with your TA if you have any questions and you just want to talk or chat something out with your TA or for your group on Slack. So I think Annie has invited everyone on Slack, and everyone should have accepted. But if you haven't, please just get on the Slack. And if you need to be on the Slack, just write a Piazza post that you haven't got invited, and we'll put you on the Slack. Okay.
Do I just put this here?
Oh yeah, you can just like pin it.
Oh, I see. So, can you guys hear me? So, AtDev has also been working on this project called Cornell Open Data Initiative, which is essentially like a collection of resources and basically of data that all Cornell students will have access to. It'll be pretty helpful for your project. If you go to any of these links, I think the second one is updated. You'll see data regarding like eateries or bus stops or classes, and I know a lot of your apps are focused on like food or like classes or something. You guys can definitely check out this resource. It's like free to use, pretty easy to use. If you guys have any questions, you can make a Piazza post. Yeah. So let's start by reviewing last week's stuff. Does anyone want to tell me what Json is? I'm gonna choose someone. Anyone? Yeah. Two? Yep. It's just a dictionary-like object containing key-value pairs. And usually JSON is what you receive when you make a HTTP request to the server. So it's like really important that you guys know what it is, how to deal with it, and translate it into, integrate it into your app. Question number 2. What is SnapKit and why do we use it? Yeah. 3? Yep. So SnapKit, which Mindy lectured about last week, it's just a CocoaPod that allows us to more easily apply constraints. So instead of having to do like ns layout constraint that activate and then like constraint equal to whatever, you can just use .snap that make constraints and then set up all your constraints in 3 or 4 lines of code. And then last question. Yes or no question, 50-50. No, yep, no. I mean, you can add it, but like, it won't break or anything. So it's pretty useful because it's just one less thing you have to worry about. So now we're gonna get into stack views. This is a screenshot that I took on Yelp, and if you look on the top, there's like 2 rows of 4 buttons. Using what you guys have learned so far, how would you guys make this? Collection view? Yeah. So you could do it by using collection view where you have like 8 cells and each cell has like an image and a label. Another way you can do it is manually, you guys create eight views with image and label inside and then add all the constraints for it. But the problem with this is those buttons are always static, right? It's not like gonna change the next time you open your app. So setting up a collection view takes a lot of time and requires a lot of code, as you guys have figured out from your projects. And if you choose the other route of using 8 individual views, you're gonna have to set up a lot of constraints to make sure that everything is spaced out properly and all the constraints are correct. Also, adapting the spacing for different device sizes and orientation is pretty difficult. So that's like a major problem with what we know so far. This is a screenshot from Instagram. I'm not sure what this video is called because I don't use it, but the Discover view, yes. So this is a grid, but let's say we wanted to just display a grid of 3 static images. It's like it's not dynamic data. If we wanted to just create a grid that's shaped like this and contains 3 static images, how would you guys create it? I mean, it's like pretty similar to the last one. You guys would probably just use a collection view, right? Because like this itself is pretty similar to your Photos app, which we mentioned you would probably use a collection view for. Yeah, so you see that. Or you can create 3 individual image views and just add constraints as necessary. Again, you get the same problem though. If you're just creating 3 image views, creating a whole collection view for it is pretty excessive. Requires a lot of time, requires a lot of code. And then laying out 3 image views to preserve the proper alignment and constraints is also, again, time consuming and requires a lot of code. So that's where UI stack views come in. To think of a UI stack view, this image is like pretty helpful, I think. It's essentially a view that allows you to stack subviews either horizontally or vertically. And if you look at the image, there are columns where there are columns that contain rows and rows that contain columns. So basically, a UI stack view is an easier way to lay out a collection of views in either a column or row. The reason you would use it is because it handles a lot of the constraints for you, so you don't have to specify like height, width, and positions for every single subview that you want, and it allows for easy adaptation for different screen sizes and orientation. So this is basically that we're going to build today. It's not too visually pleasing, but it'll get the idea across. This view is supposed to scroll, and then if you click in the add row button, that green view shows up. So let's start with the project. So you guys want to go start and make a new Xcode project for the lecture. I already made one called Lecture 8. And then you delete storyboard. Is your right click?
Click and click the delete.
Oh.
Also make sure your presentation mode for the preferences for the text.
I think Mindy set that up. And then delete main storyboard file base name. And then for this project, we're also going to be using Snapkit. So does anyone remember the command for creating a pod file? Pod init, yep. So pod init, it's loading. And then you go into your pod file. We're going to be using Snapkit, so just insert Snapkit. And then how do you, I guess it's just pod install. And then remember, once you guys pod install, you guys have to switch to the XC workspace instead of the XC code project. So open LA.XC workspace. Okay, it opened up here. Is everyone caught up? All right, cool. So now we're gonna want to go into app delegate and do our basic setup. Window equals UI window. Frame UI screen dot main dot bounds. Window dot root view controller equals UI navigation controller. And then we're gonna just use view controller. And last thing is make key invisible. Alright, cool. Now we're gonna go into our collection view, our view controller file. First thing we're gonna want to use is something called a scroll view. So typically, whenever you guys wanted to make anything that scrolled, you guys would use either a table view or a collection view. But actually, both of those classes are just children classes of UI scroll view, and it's essentially a view that allows you to scroll. So that's what we're going to use to make our view scroll. And in here, let's set the title to form, background color to white, and then set up our scroll view. So scroll view equals UI scroll view, and then you want it to always scroll vertically. So you just set the always bound vertical equals true, and then view that at subview scroll view. And then let's also set up our constraint function. So set up constraints, func set up constraints. Oh, we also need to import SnapKit. Does anyone remember the syntax for setting up constraints with SnapKit? Alright, I'm going to call on someone. Everyone's just looking away. Perfect. Can the second person in there? Sorry, I don't know your name. Yeah. Do you remember the syntax? Or any three of you? I'll give you a chance. Any three of you. No one? Well, we imported it already. I'll give you a hint. It's scroll view, and then dot SMP for snap dot make constraints, right? And then here we can just define whatever constraints we want. We want the scroll view to take up the size of the whole screen. So one way you could do it is just like individually do make dot leading dot equal to super view, and then make dot trailing. But SnapKit has a really useful constraint called make dot edges dot equal to super view, which will essentially do the same thing as setting the leading, trailing, top, bottom. So that's what we have for the scroll view. And then next thing we're gonna want to add is the stack view. So let's declare a stack view. And here, if you do stack view equals UI stack view. If you look at the constructors, there are three. The one we're going to use is the one with arranged subviews. Essentially, this constructor takes in an array of views that it will lay out. If you look at if you remember our picture, we're first going to create this like form view thing that's a label in the text field. So let's also declare that. So form view, and then actually let's just do form view first. So form view equals UI view, and then form view dot background color equals dot red. And then normally we would do like add subview, something dot add subview with form view. But with stack views, instead of doing that, we can just insert that here, and then it will automatically know that the form view is a child of the stack view. And then before we still have some more stuff to do to set up the stack view. So stack view has a couple of properties. One of them is called axis, and this essentially defines the axis with which your layout is going to be defined. You have either horizontal or vertical. So horizontal will display it horizontally, vertical, vertically. We're going to want vertical because it's going to be scrolling vertically. And then stack view also has a property called alignment. And this essentially defines how it's going to lay out your views on the axis that's perpendicular to this one. So in this case, since we defined it to be vertical, this is going to define how you lay out your views horizontally. The default one is .fill, which is what we're going to use. And it's like, for the most part, it's like what you guys are going to use. So we actually don't have to set that. And then there's also another property called distribution. And as you can see, it basically tells Xcode Xcode how you're going to lay out your views along the axis. There are a couple of different options. One is equal centering, equal spacing, fill equally, fill proportionally. I'm not going to get into all of them, but like they're all pretty self-explanatory. The one we're going to use is fill equally. And then last but not least, we have to add it as a subview of the view. What's wrong here? So now let's try running that. Does anyone have any questions? Cool. Oh, we forgot to do one thing. Does anyone know? We didn't set any constraints for the stack view, so it doesn't know how big to make it. So stack view.snap.make constraints, make in. Here we can also do make the edges equal to super view. And normally this would be fine, but for stack views, if you don't explicitly define the width and height, then the width and height of the stack view is just going to be the intrinsic content size of all its subviews. So what we want to do is explicitly set the width and height to be equal to the super view, so that the stack view is always the full size of the screen. Now if we build, we should see something. Yeah, here. So now we have a scroll view. Or it should scroll. But as you can see here, we have a stack view, and all we have is the form view, which takes up the entire space because that's the only subview. Let's now add some fields. Instead of adding both the label and text field, let's just do the label. So var form label, UI label, and then form label equals UI label, form label dot text equals label, and then we add it as a subview of the form view because we want it to be inside the form view. And now when we make constraints for the label, you have to do it relative to the form view. So form label .snap.make constraints. We're going to make the size equal to the intrinsic content size. Intrinsic content size. And then make it centered along the y-axis. And then let's say we want to make it 8 pixels from the left. We would do make.leading equal to super view. And then how would we offset it by 8 pixels? Yeah, dot offset. There's also dot multiply and some other stuff. So we're going to use that offset 8. Now if we build this again, we should see the label. I'm not really sure why it's not scrolling. It should scroll, but here you see the stack view. Did you see the stack view containing the form view, which contains the label? So the next thing we're going to do is add this button called add row button. So let's do that. Or add. Actually, let's call it add remove button because we wanted to add and remove the empty green view. So add remove button, and then let's also set up the empty green view. So add remove button equals UI button. Set the title. Set the title to be button for not normal. Let's set the background color to gray. And I think that's all we need. Oh, another thing I forgot to mention is stack views also have this property called spacing, which is essentially the number of pixels that you want to have between each subview. Let's make it 12 for now. So if I build this, you should see the form view on top and then the button on the bottom with 12 pixels in between. Yep, there we go. So we have the form view and then the button. So now we want to trigger an event whenever the button is clicked. So let's create a function for that. So add random button that add target self, and then let's just call this like button press or something. For.touchup inside, and then we can add that on the bottom. Font sender UI button. So here is essentially where we want to handle either inserting or removing the green view. And one property that we can use to handle that is the isSelected property of UI buttons. So we can use the isSelected. Let's do if not selected. This and then else this. So when you first create a UI button, the isSelected property is has a default value of false. So here is essentially what will be called when we click on it for the first time. So here what we want to do is essentially insert the empty green view into the stack view. The way we can do that is by doing stack view dot insert arrange subview view at index. So here we're going to do empty green view. Did I set that up? I did not. So let's do that real quickly. Empty green view equals UI view. Empty green view dot background color equals dot green. And then since we want it to be after the add remove button, we're going to insert at index 2. And then you also have to make sure to set the isSelected property to now be true, because if it's false, next time it's clicked, you want it to be true. And then similarly here, you can probably guess what you would write. Dot remove arrange subview, empty green view, and then sender dot isSelected equals false. And this should work. So yeah, there we go. So actually for typically, just having remove arrange subview does not actually work. The reason it works right now is because we're using the fill equally property. But if we were using like the equal spacing property or equal centering property, and like we actually define a height constraint for the empty green view, doing this will cause some like weird bug. And the reason for that is because just calling the function will just will basically tell the stack view to stop managing the empty green view. However, the constraint for the empty green view will still remain. So to make sure that that goes away completely, what you want to do is do empty green view dot remove from super view. In fact, you can just use that instead of this. So if we run that again, you should get the same effect. Yep, so we have that. One thing we could do to make this a bit nicer is instead of having like the green view instantaneously show up and disappear like pretty abruptly, we can add some sort of like animation. So the way we can do that is by first, what we're gonna want to do is add the empty green view into the actual stack view from the beginning. Except since we don't want to display it at first, we're gonna set the empty green view dot is hidden property to be true. So it's going to be a part of the stack view, but it's going to be hidden. So it's not going to be displayed. And then in here, we're going to want to change this as well. So if we click on the button for the first time, we want to show it, right? So we would do empty green view dot is hidden equals false. And then here we would do the opposite. If you run this again, you'll essentially get the same effect as we had before. But to insert an animation, what you guys want to do is do UI-view.animate, and then you should see this with duration and animations. Essentially, this function allows you to specify some time duration across which animations will occur, and then inside this block, you can either define like constraint changes or like size changes or whatever you want, and then it'll display it across that time. So we do like 0.5 seconds, and then add this code into there. It will animate the empty green view being shown. And then same thing here. Animate 0.5. What? So if we run that, we should get some sort of smoother transition. See, so now if you click on it, there's like a small period where you can see the actual green view being shown and removed. We don't cover animations too much in this class, but if you want to, like, for example, in our polling app, there's like a animation change for displaying results. If you guys want to incorporate that into your app, you can definitely use this. All right, nice. Now let's move on to creating this row of buttons, which is essentially like what you would use for the Yelp button. What we want to do is create a row of buttons where the buttons are equally spaced across all different device sizes. So the way we would do that is, actually, how do you guys think we should make this? Any guesses? Do you want to take a guess? Yeah, you. How would you make this? Make these 4 buttons.
Like, wouldn't you make like the view you had be like a collection view with the button?
We could use a collection view or
Image view.
Yeah, or the name of this, which is a stack view, right? Since we want to lay out the buttons equally, we can just use another stack view. So stack views can actually contain other stack views, which is pretty powerful. So let's define another stack view here called button stack view. UI stack view. And then right below here, button stack view equals UI stack view with some buttons. So let's create our buttons. Let button 1 equals UI button. Button 1 dot set title b1 for dot normal. And then I think we also need to set the title color, or else we won't see it. And let's do that for like 2 more times. And then we can just add that in here. So button 1, button 2, and button 3. This time, what do you guys think we should set for the axis? Horizontal, yeah, because they're going to be displayed horizontally. And then we can also set the distribution. Since we want them to be equally spaced out, we can just use the same dot fill equally distribution. And then we don't really care about spacing, so that should be good. And then we have to remember to add it to our main stack view, or else it won't appear. So button stack view, and let's run that. We should see these 4 buttons, or three buttons. Yeah, so there we go. So now we have these 3 buttons. Oh, something cool that I mentioned before is that stack views help you preserve the spacing across different orientations. So we do this vertically. These buttons are still equally spaced out, and if you click the button, the green view still shows up, and everything's still like very well proportioned. So that's like another benefit of the stack view. And then now let's create this like grid thing that we saw on Instagram. Anyone have a guess on how we would make this? Pretty similar to before. A stack view, and then what would you have inside?
Another stack view.
Yeah, so you would have a stack view, and then this would probably be just a UI view, and then here you would just have another stack view, right? So we can do that real quick. So grid stack view, UI view, and then yeah. So grid stack view equals UI stack view, and then we need to find the other view. So let red square view equals UI view. Red square view dot background color equals dot red, and then for this we're also going to want another stack view because as you can see the spacing is like constant throughout this vertical and horizontal spacing, so that's a really good incentive to use another stack view. So let's call that nested stack view. Oh, whoops. And then let's create the other 2 views. So let green view equals UI view, green, and green view the background color equals dot green, and then let yellow view equals UI view, and then set the background color to yellow. And then let's set up the nested stack view. This is just going to contain the green view and the yellow view. And then the axis is going to be vertical because this is vertical. So nested stack view dot axis equals dot vertical. The distribution you can use dot fill equally again. And then let's say we want a spacing of like 12 or something. So nested stack view dot spacing equals 12. And then here what we would have is the red square view and the nested stack view. And then we have the set property for this as well. So grid stack view dot axis would be, in this case it would be horizontal because this is our first subview and this is our second one, so that's horizontal. So it's like pretty similar to this one actually. And then set the distribution to fill equally, and then set spacing to 12. And then the last thing is you have to add this to our main stack view, or else it won't show up. Compile error. So now we should get this. Where is it? Yeah, so now we have essentially what we wanted to build here. And here you have like the grid layout that you saw on the Instagram app. So now let's actually try something else. Let's say we wanted one row to have like a specific size ratio, right? So here you can see the green view is 3 times the size of this yellow view, and this red view is twice the size of this yellow view. The way we would make that is by using the fill proportionally distribution that I mentioned before. So let's just start by creating our stack view. Proportion stack view. UI stack view, and then proportion stack view equals UI stack view. So the way that the fill proportionally distribution works is that it looks at the intrinsic content sizes of its subviews. But here we're going to be using UI views, which themselves don't inherently have any defined intrinsic content sizes. So in order to achieve this effect, what we're going to want to do is make a new class that is a subview of UI view. So new Swift file, custom view, import UI kit, class custom view, UI view. And then here we're going to want to set a variable called like width that we can set to 1. I'll explain why later. And then here we can override the intrinsic content size property and then return some CG size. So for width, we're going to do width, which corresponds to this, and then height does not really matter. So the reason we want to do this is because by creating this variable, we can then set the width of the intrinsic content size's width by just doing like custom view.width equals 1 or equals 2 equals 3. And then for the height doesn't really matter because if you guys remember, this stack view is going to be horizontally laid out, and the default alignment property is set to .fill, which means that the default height for all your subviews will just be the height of the stack view, because the alignment property defines how it layouts your views perpendicular to your axis. So in this case, it will fill up the vertical axis. So the height we don't really care about. What we care about is the width, because that's how it will proportionally define the width for your views. So if we go back here, we can create like 2 or 3 custom views. Or custom view 2. Or custom view 3. And then let's go down here and create them. So custom view 1 equals custom view. Set the background color to like green. And then we have to set the width to be, well, in this case, we want it to be 3 because we want this green view to be 3 times as wide as the yellow one. And then for the second one, we do the same thing. We set that to .red, and then in this case, we want to set the width to 2 because we want to have a 3 to 2 to 1 ratio. And lastly, we have the third one. Set to .yellow, and then .width to be 1. Now we can just add those here. Custom view 1, custom view 2, custom view 3. And then we define the normal properties of the axis, which we want to be horizontal. And then this time the distribution, we're going to use .fill proportionally. And actually, so I'm not sure if it's a bug with Apple, but if you try to set your spacing while your distribution is filled proportionally, the layout gets like really messed up. So I can show that here. So I just set like anything like 8 and run that. We should see like it'll be like really weird. Oh wait, I forgot to add it. So I forgot to add it, which is why it doesn't show up. Did I added the wrong thing? I added the wrong thing. So I need to add it. I need to add it to the main stack view. Any questions so far? Nice. Yeah, so now you see we set the first one to be 3, and then second one to 2, third one should be 1. So you would expect the green to be the biggest, red to be the second biggest, and yellow to be the smallest. But when we set the spacing, it like messes with the layout. So it's just something to keep in mind. If you guys do use this fill proportionally property, not to set the spacing. If we comment that out and then rebuild, it should look normal again. Yes, there we go. So now we have this green view, which is 3 times the width of the yellow view, and the red view, which is twice the width of the yellow view. Yeah. Nice. Does anyone have any questions? Alright, so this is just like a summary. The reason we use stack views is because it allows you to manage a lot of the constraints for your subviews and helps you maintain all the spacing and proportion across a lot of different screen sizes. So like if you would imagine perhaps the buttons, if we were instead to use a collection view or manually set the constraints, we would probably have like 3 or 4 constraints for each. And if you had like 4 buttons, that would be like 12 constraints. But here, all we had to do was initialize it and then add it to the stack view. And then these are the properties that I mentioned. The axis defines the axis with which your views are going to be displayed, so either vertical or horizontal. The distribution determines how the stack view lays out your views. So you have fill equally, fill proportionally, equal spacing, equal centering. Equal spacing just means that the spacing between each subview will be constant. And equal centering means that the center between all your subviews will be constant. Alignment determines how the stack view lays out your views on the perpendicular axis. So if your axis was vertical, it would define how your views would be laid out horizontally or vertically, whichever one I said. Usually the default value is .fill, which is usually what you guys want to use. But there's also .leading, .top, the center, the trailing, etc. And then spacing is just the number of pixels that you want between your views. So going back to the beginning, if you guys were to create these row buttons, you could use the collection views or manually create your views, but it's probably a lot better to just create a stack view. It'll save you a lot of time, a lot of effort. And then same thing with this. If you wanted to display a static grid, you'd probably just use a stack view. Any questions? Yeah.
So for the example, on the Yelp app, there were 2 rows.
Yeah.
But they were like spaced equally but horizontally.
Yeah.
How do you determine like how many rows you want for your elements?
How many rows?
Because
I mean,
the buttons you just did like make the space equal or like fill equally.
yeah.
It's like that. Is it that right? But how would you do it if you wanted to do it?
Well, you could just, I mean, there are 2 ways to do this. One way you could do it is this whole thing would be one stack view, and then inside you would have 2 individual stack views. So like the first stack view would be horizontal, second one would be horizontal, and the main one would be vertical. Any other questions? Cool. So I was, it doesn't show up here, but I was looking through the teams for the hackathon, and I noticed a couple of teams don't have any like backend developers, even though you guys might need one. So actually, yeah, one of my groups reached out to me about that, and something I would recommend is using something called Google Firebase. Has anyone used that before? One person, nice. Let me just. So let me log on to my account actually. So Google Firebase is essentially a platform built by Google that essentially allows you to like set up a server actually they set up the server for you essentially. And it's like pretty easy to integrate into your iOS app. It provides a lot of different services like authentication, storage, databases. So if you guys don't have a backend developer but need one, I would highly recommend using Google Firebase. It's also free, so once I log in, I can show you. So Firebase. So if you go to their website, you click on Get Started, you'll see they'll bring you to a console. And then here you can click, oh wait, click the wrong thing. Whoops. So add project. So you can call it whatever, my awesome project. And then project ID, sure. And then create project. And this was built specifically for integrating into your mobile or web apps. So it's like pretty useful. Continue. And now let's say you want to integrate into iOS. You just click iOS, bundle ID. Let's take the lecture one. So bundle ID just refers to this. Nickname you don't need, so just register app. And then here you want to download the Google Service info plist file and then drag that into your Xcode project. I'm not going to download it, but that's what you would do. And then you would install this pod by inserting into your pod file, and then do pod install. And here's the initialization code that they tell you to add to your app bucket. They click finish, and then here, if you click on develop, you'll see a ton of different things. Storage database authentication. So let's say you wanted to integrate an authentication system into your app. You can set up a sign-in method. So let's say you want to do email password, you could do that by just doing enable. And then, or you can do phone, Google, Facebook, anonymous, whatever. And essentially the way this would work is if you select email and password, there would be a route that you would send your email and password to. So that's basically that. There's database with which you can use to store any data you need for your project, and then storage for storing like videos, images, whatever you may need. So that's like pretty much it. There's also like analytics, which I guess you guys could use, but you guys probably won't use. Yeah, so if you guys are in a team that does not have any backend developers but need to set up some sort of like server to store your data, you guys can use Firebase. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to message me or any of the TAs or Young. And yeah, any questions? All right, that's the end of lecture. What? If anyone has any questions or projects, you can come and ask as well. Oh, let me stop this.